Could we cope, do you think, if there was another economic crisis?
So our shock absorber ain't what it was, right? I mean, this is actually something that the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility pointed out in an important and very worrying analysis of the long-term public finances. If we go back to the year 2000, the ratio of debt to GDP was 30%, right? It is now quite close to 100%. Now, there is no magic number that says one level of debt as a share of our national income, our GDP, is, unbelievably risky.
Yeah.
But let's be absolutely clear. When you've got debt that's 30% of GDP and there's an economic shock, okay, which is indeed what happened during the financial crisis of 2007-8, if you have to do a lot of spending to bail out the banks and then a lot of spending to prop up the economy, help people with their pay more unemployment benefits than the rest, you can push up your share of national debt by 10 or 20% to see you through the crisis. And if you get to 50, 60% debt to GDP, that's just about manageable. Once you're at 100% of GDP, if we were to get another financial crisis, actually at that point, when you add another 10 or 20% of debt to the balance sheet, those who lend to the British government, at that point they do start to worry. Actually, how easy will it be for a government to pay back this money? Because in the end, lenders to any government, view creditworthiness in pretty much the same way as they view lending to a company or lending to me and you. In the end, it's all about do you have a strong enough economy to generate the tax revenues to pay the interest on these loans that you've got. And when you're getting, let's say, to 120, 130% of GDP, at that point, some investors genuinely have really deep anxieties. And you could probably, even at those sorts of levels, borrow money. But if the risk goes up, they charge you more for it. So one of the things that's been going on for this government that is a concern, because, they did, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer inherited quite high debt, is that even though the Bank of England is in the process of cutting its interest rate, the interest rate that matters to the government is what the investors charge when lending to the government. And that's pretty high at the moment, right? And it's been rising. Monica hits on a very important issue, which is that although we're all desperate for the Chancellor to, find the money to fund the things that we care about, whether it's health and schools and those sorts of public services, she's also got, she is in the end the steward of our finances, and she's got to be careful not to borrow too much.
Well, Roger Merritt asks, why does the government complain of a black hole in the public finances yet finds money when needed? For example, says Roger, Ukraine ought to increase defence spending. Well, I guess there's a set size to the cake unless you borrow money, and the government decides what the priorities are. And a lot of people would say defence is a priority and Ukraine is a priority.
Yeah, look, I think there are two things here, Roger. One is that there is always, it's shrunk over recent years because the successive governments have been less prudent, but there's something called a reserve that the Treasury maintains. So for emergency spending, you sort of dip into the reserve. It's like a sort of bank account that some people would keep for a rainy day, if you're lucky enough to have some spare savings. But when it comes to increasing defence spending, I mean, Roger, to be clear, the actual guaranteed increase in defence spending it has been funded by cuts to overseas aid, very significant cuts to overseas aid, which are having a very negative impact on some very poor countries in the rest of the world. So, let's be clear. There isn't a magic money tree here, and we're, for a whole variety of reasons, most conspicuous ones, but not the most important, were, government being forced to drop its welfare reforms or massively scale them back, to massively scale back the means testing of the winter fuel allowance. That's £6 billion that it thought it was saving, that it's now going to have to find, probably by pushing up taxes in the budget. This budget will see probably £20 billion of tax rises. So again, no magic money tree. This is painful stuff for the whole economy. 20 billion of tax rises that are almost certainly coming in the autumn.